you all could take your seats, we're going to get started.
All right.
Due to the acoustics, if you wouldn't mind. If you wouldn't mind holding your conversations, please. Excuse me, sir, sorry. We're going to get started.
Explaining something very important. So my name is Keith Blackburn. I'm the mayor of Carlsbad, newly elected after serving 14 years on the city council. I've done what all smart politicians do. I brought staff with me, and you'll know that staff are the people who keep us out of trouble. So I was asked, what is this building before it was dropped off here at Big E Park? Jason Haber had the answers for me. This used to be a church at St. Patrick's Catholic Church. Then, when it was no longer being used, this actually worked as a city hall, a police station, and then later it was used as, help me out? A library. So this has been a temporary building for just about everything through the city, and that's probably why it's located here as a historic monument. I'm also watching Congressman Levin and how he's talking to everybody. A congressman whose office is in another state far, far away, and being a congressman getting pulled and tugged by every city employee who wants something from the government, including every resident, for him to take the time to be here and meet with a small group of local residents, he gets a ton of credit for that. And I'm watching that. And thank you for that. I'm learning. So it's my pleasure to introduce him to you today. When I was originally asked to introduce him, I was given this long bio of all of his accomplishments. We run out of time. So I just picked a couple of things that I thought was important to citizens or residents of Carlsbad. In the last two cycles, Congressman was responsible for helping Carlsbad secure $5 million for our barrio for lighting and roundabouts and traffic issues, and another $3 million for our upcoming Veterans Park. So that I thought was one of the most important contributions to our residents. But also another contribution that I think is equally as important is he served 2 or 3 years on the Veterans Affairs Committee. And I think that's a big deal as well. So it's my pleasure to introduce our Congressman Levin.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Keep applauding for your mayor. Thank you, Keith, for all that you do. If you're and don't leave, because if the questions are about potholes, that's your guy. That's your guy. But very grateful, and really want to thank your staff for being here, for the great work they do. Want to thank our staff for being here as well. I can't do the job that I do without having really an outstanding staff, both in Washington, D.C. And here in the district, and we really have that, and I'm truly grateful for all the work that they do. I'll mention this at the end as well, but we take great pride in doing casework, whether it's for our veterans who have issues with the VA or people that have issues, could be the IRS, Social Security, Medicare, it could be immigration related. We take great pride in helping the community. So I do hope that if you have any issue before the federal government, that you'll see one of our folks. I see Shannon Bradley in the back. She does an incredible job. But I hope that you'll just spend a moment, introduce yourself, and we can get rolling on helping you with any of those issues. I am really excited to be here. This is our 97th town hall since we started. So I was first elected in 2018. I was sworn in January of 2019, and we said we would have at least one a month, and we have, and then some. Obviously during COVID, we had to go virtual for a lot of those, but I'm really proud. And for number 100, we're going to have a big cake. That's all I know. But it's great to see some familiar faces, great to see some new ones as well. For those that don't know me, I'm Mike Levin, and I have the honor of going to Washington, D.C. Very often on behalf of our community. Our district, for those that don't know, goes all the way up in Orange County and Laguna Niguel, Dana Point, San Juan Capistrano, San Clemente, Rancho Mission Viejo, Camp Pendleton. Do we have any Marines in the house? No Marines? Oh, we got a couple. Can we give the Marines a round of applause? Thank you, guys. We'll talk about veterans in a minute, but I appreciate you guys. And Camp Pendleton is the heart of the district. And then we've got, of course, Oceanside, Carlsbad, Vista, Encinitas, Solana Beach, and Del Mar. So 50 miles of beautiful California coast, some fairly unique challenges. as well that come with living in this amazing place that we all live. We have a lot to talk about. There are any number of things that I could talk about. It's very crazy and contentious what's going on in Washington, D.C., but I figured I would just summarize a few of the things we did at the end of last Congress and that we've done in the first 2 months of this Congress. So the last big act of the 117th, that's the last Congress, we're currently the 118th Congress, was the government funding legislation. And you hear a lot about, it's called the Omnibus. Hi, Teresa. By the way, we're just joined, in addition to Mayor Blackburn, we've got Councilmember Teresa Acosta here. Thank you, Teresa. Appreciate you. We appreciate you. And at the end of the last Congress, we had this big omnibus bill with lots of different things. But one of the things I'm most proud of is we got around $50 million for 15 different projects in our district. And really goes up and down the district, and everything from mental health services, infrastructure improvements, a more reliable water supply, and lots of other things as well. And then in the past number of months, if you go back to last year, we passed a lot of different legislation trying to lower healthcare costs, capping the price of insulin for those on Medicare to $35 a month, and capping the out-of-pocket maximum for prescription drugs for Medicare to $2,000 a year, trying to strengthen the competitiveness of the global workforce, global economy, as it pertains to things like microchips, semiconductors, clean energy technology, making sure that we're manufacturing a lot more in the United States. I talked about making historic investments in our infrastructure, but we passed the biggest infrastructure legislation since the Eisenhower administration. And this coming year, I think you're going to be seeing a lot more of the projects, the shovels in the ground, up and down this district. I'll talk a bit more about the rail corridor in a minute. And I'm proud that throughout the first 4 years I've been in Congress, again, first elected in 18 and sworn in January of 2019, 27 of my bills have passed both in the last administration, the current administration, signed into law by Republicans and Democrats alike. And that's a lot, and we're really proud of that. And it's not just number, it's not just quantity, it's quality as well. But as I look at these next 2 years, I serve with a lot of people with a lot of differing opinions, as I'm sure you know if you watch any cable news. And I was in the House Natural Resources Committee. By the way, I'm very proud. I'm back on the House Natural Resources Committee, and I'm back on the House Veterans Affairs Committee. Very proud of that. So we're in the first organizational meeting of the House Natural Resources Committee. It was very contentious, very crazy. Then the first hearing, and it was very contentious and very crazy. And it got to my turn to question the witnesses. And I paused for a second and I said, look, to my colleagues who are here on my side of the aisle, across the aisle, who I have great respect for, we can spend the next 2 years literally yelling at each other the entire time. And we can focus on everything that we disagree about, and we could allow that disagreement to turn truly into dislike for one another. Or, despite our policy differences, we could actually try to have a well-intentioned dialogue about the things we might agree on. And we might actually find some common ground. And I firmly believe that. And now more than ever, over these next 2 years, we have this opportunity. And look, I don't like being in the minority, and I much would rather have the gavel than be the ranking member. But I'm going to do everything I can these next 2 years to try to find people across the aisle that I can work with and that we can actually deliver results for the district. And what we've done in just the very beginning of this new 118th Congress is introduce bipartisan legislation. One of the bills is to increase funding for county veterans service officers that help our veteran community at the county level. And I'm very proud that we're reintroducing that bill with Kathy McMorris Rogers, a Republican from Washington State. And then another is called the Prevent Family Fire Act. That's one that we'll be reintroducing very shortly. That's to provide a tax credit for safe storage devices for firearms. We know that when guns are safely stored in the home, the rate of accidents goes down 73%. And we're going to be reintroducing that bill coming up very soon with Mike Lawler, who's a Republican in New York. We also just introduced a bill for nursing home transparency that we did with Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania. So I bring all this up because there is opportunity for us to come together. We're going to also be reintroducing, this is the last one I'll talk about, One of our bills on nuclear waste, of course, we've got an issue with nuclear waste, but one of our bills is to prioritize moving spent nuclear fuel from any site that has higher seismic risk, higher population density, and higher national security concerns. And I reintroduced that bill with Darrell Issa as the co-lead. So for those that know, I once ran against Darrell. It shows you that we can all come together and we can all find common ground. I also need your ideas. I always say my output as a legislator is only as good as my input. I also say representative is not only my job title, it is my job description. So I genuinely need your feedback, your ideas. I had a couple folks at the beginning approach me about Ukraine. We need your ideas. I mean that sincerely. So Kyle, our district director, you'll be hearing from him in a minute. You can approach him or really any of our staff as well. So I talked a bit about the committees. Very proud to now be the ranking member on the Veterans Affairs Committee for Economic Opportunity. That has jurisdiction over the GI Bill, transition, workforce development, homelessness, housing, and I also serve on the Veterans Health Subcommittee. So I'm going to continue to work very, very hard on helping our veterans. I was just over there giving out Valentine's, by the way, happy Valentine's Day in advance. We do a thing every year called Valentine's for Veterans, where we go to our local elementary schools and we get them to write veterans, or Valentine's for, I wish we had a few more for you guys, I'm sorry. But we went over to the VA today and it was a very special thing to do. My grandpa was a World War II veteran, and I'm always thinking of him, and he's sort of looking over my shoulder saying, don't mess it up. You better serve our veterans well. The other thing very much on my mind is the debt ceiling. And if you've been following the news, this is something that's going to be really coming to a head in the summer. I want to make sure everybody understands that the debt ceiling is all about paying the credit card bills that have already accumulated. We don't really have the choice whether we pay these. Well, I guess we have a choice, but it would be a very bad outcome. Even the threat of not paying our debts results in massively higher borrowing costs. Back in 2011, when we got close, I say we, when the federal government, the Congress got close to the fiscal cliff, we had to pay an additional $1.3 billion in borrowing costs because our interest rate went up when our credit rating went down. So what we need is to have a good faith discussion with our friends across the aisle. The challenge is that our friends across the aisle don't agree what it is that they want or what it is that they're willing to compromise about, because different parts of their party have different ideas about what that looks like. I can tell you I have a few pretty steadfast values. One is that we're not going to cut any of our earned benefits, any of our Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Those of you who are on Social Security, you paid into Social Security. This is an investment. You paid. It's insurance, literally. You paid into it. And so we should not be cutting Social Security or cutting Medicare or cutting Medicaid. We also shouldn't be doing anything to harm our veterans. When they're talking about non-defense discretionary spending as the basis for negotiation, a lot of that is spending for our veterans. I'm not going to agree to cut a penny of spending for our veterans, period, full stop. And then the fourth thing is defense. A lot of my friends across the aisle, they're not going to touch, and a lot of us on our side of the aisle are not going to do much to cut defense spending. So here's the reason I bring all this up. If you rule out Social Security, because remember the other night, did you see the State of the Union address? And the president sort of boxed everybody in and they said, we're not going to touch Social Security. If you remember that, okay, great. I agree with that. Don't touch Social Security, don't touch Medicare, don't touch veterans, don't touch defense. Well, according to the Congressional Budget Office, you'd have to cut everything else by a quarter or more. So that's going to have a dramatic negative impact on people's lives. And you hear about waste, fraud, and abuse. I'm all about cutting waste, fraud, and abuse. But there's only so much waste, fraud, and abuse. You can't cut that much. The numbers just don't add up. So we need to have a serious dialogue. And the missing piece on the other side of the aisle is on revenue. When you have certain corporations paying zero or near zero, when you've got the very wealthiest who are paying an extraordinarily low tax rate, it's very difficult to have that balance unless you have to have a serious dialogue unless you talk about revenues as well as spending. So that's something that's very much on my mind. So I think at the end of the day, I won't spend any more time because I want to get to all the questions that we can. But at the end of the day, I think the next couple of years, for me, they're about trying to find bipartisan compromise wherever we can implementing the programs and the legislation that we've already passed, whether it's the infrastructure law, whether it's the Inflation Reduction Act, whether it's the CHIPS and Science Act, the PACT Act for our veterans who are exposed to toxic substances and burn pits. We've got to make sure that we implement. And then hopefully in 2 years' time, we'll have gotten something done. I can't say it's going to be anything, that there will be some great, moment of reflection where all the Republicans decide to work with all the Democrats. It's not going to happen overnight. But we've got to find areas of common ground, and we've got to make sure that those things that we've passed are tremendously successful, whether it's for Carlsbad or anywhere else in our district. So with that, I'm truly grateful that you're here. We'll get to as many of these questions as we can. I'm going to turn it over to Kyle, who, and I think he's got a bunch of them.
We do.
Excellent. And thanks for coming. Thank you for taking time out of your day.
And I'll just read your name and the question, and if you want to just wave your hand when I read your name so we can all see who asked it, that'd be great. And then the congressman will answer.
Thank you. And we'll have as much of a dialogue as we can. I want to be respectful of everybody's time and get to as many of these as we can, maybe all of them.
I hope so. And in fact, the first one may be quick, because Alan Barnaby of Solana Beach, Alan, thank you for that first question,
Thank you, Alan.
is actually your strategy for raising the debt limit, which you already addressed if you wanted to say anything more on the debt limit.
Well, I think that we need to try to pass a clean debt limit. We did it 3 times under the last administration, but we also need to be realistic that when you have divided government, there has to be some common ground. There has to be some coming together around some shared principles. But my principles are pretty solid. I'm never going to do anything to jeopardize our retirement security, our Social Security, our Medicare, Medicaid, veterans, and we're going to have a dialogue about revenue and about spending. Yes, sir.
Could you please just say more specifically, beyond, we need to sit down with people on the other side and
Sure.
talk. What specific things can be done to get Republicans to want to come further than they do?
Well, a lot of my Republican friends are in a wait-and-see attitude right now, which is kind of unfortunate, but one of the things that we've discussed is if McCarthy can't come to any sort of agreement with the president, or for that matter, if the Republican Party writ large can't agree on what it wants, then what you could have is you could have, say, 200 or 210 Democrats come together with a handful of Republicans and pass something called a discharge petition. You might be reminded of a discharge petition again and again later this summer if it really comes down to it. And what that is when you introduce a bill, and that bill is stuck, in effect, in committee for 30 legislative days, then a majority can go to the floor and file what's called a discharge petition to free that legislation from committee and have it voted on up or down. And the idea is that if the Republican leadership cannot negotiate a deal on the debt ceiling, that perhaps we could do it with a discharge petition. Now, that's not easy to do. It's only been done one time in recent memory for the reauthorization of the Export-Import Bank. And it takes time because 30 legislative days actually is a good long period of time. So we'd have to get rolling on this pretty soon. But I can tell you those discussions are being had as well. So ideally, a clean debt limit bill with a agreement that we're going to look at revenue and spending. Backup plan would be the discharge petition with a clean debt limit or something approaching a clean debt limit.
Thank you. The next question comes from Susan Wayo from the Center for Community Energy. And
Where is Susan? Hi, Susan. How you doing?
She asked, are there any federal grants that are nonprofit, which focuses on energy, decarbonization, electrification, research, and education should or might pursue?
Oh my God, how long do you have? Yeah. Okay, so what I would love to do without going through a laundry list, the Inflation Reduction Act, between the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the largest investment in climate in the history of any country, by the way, really a transformative piece of legislation that'll help us hit our greenhouse gas reduction goals by the time that we need to. Between that and the bipartisan infrastructure law, there are tremendous opportunities for greenhouse gas reduction, different grants, incentives, some tax policies.
I'm following the
Yeah.
incentives, but I'm asking specifically about grants to help fund a nonprofit that focuses on this.
The answer is very likely yes, and what we'd love to do, maybe we could follow up, Kyle, and we could learn the specifics about what you're trying to achieve. and then we can see if there's any applicable grant programs. I mean, it's a huge bill with all sorts of different programs that are available. We just have to work with you, find the right one. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from David R. Graham.
David.
All right.
David's already confused me, quizzed me. I got a math problem. I didn't know I was going to get a math problem. Thank you, David.
David does have two questions. The first one might be a little bit more of a yes or no. Have you ever read Adam Smith's book, quote, The Theory of Moral Sentiments?
Haven't. Need to add it to my queue.
All right. Then
I'll make that easy.
Okay.
But that's a leading question, as you might imagine. I just want to explain a little bit about why I asked that question.
Yes, sir.
Because it focuses on the solution, I think, to our inequities in our economic system, which abound in this country all over the place. Adam Smith is not the father of modern capitalism, which he's always touted to have been. He's really the father of classical economics with two motivations, not just one, for economic behavior. One is self-interest, which we still have today big time. The other was with empathy. Now, his vision of economics is not what we have today. Alfred Marshall really is the father of modern capitalism. Milton Friedman boosted up in the mid-60s, and then Ronald Reagan capped on it with his, if everybody goes after their self-interest, everything will work out great for everybody. Well, it hasn't really done that. So, I would like to see somebody like a representative that represents my district take this on and say, look, let's get back to what the founders wanted, which really was Adam Smith's version of economics. I mean, he was a contemporary of the founders. They read his stuff, and they wanted to form a government that had some kind of good economics. Well, they saw the theory of moral sentiments. And I don't know, can you take that on? I mean, that's
Well, what I can offer you is I have 9 hours a week on an airplane, and if you follow up with us, I can be happy to take a look. Oh, he's got the book.
Let me tell you.
He's got the
I
book.
don't know. I looked on Google
Here,
to find
let's
out
see.
where when your birthday was. So I think it's a belated birthday present, or it's in
Amazing.
advance of your.
Thank you.
So sure.
Wow. I didn't know I was going to get a book. Thank you so much. Excellent. I'm going to give this to Kyle. Thank you. Thank you. Here, take your ticket back. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Very good. Is your contact in here?
Yeah. Right enough.
Okay, perfect. And when I'm done, we can. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Wow.
And I'll put your question at the second question will be at the back of the queue so we can get to as many as we possibly can.
Perfect.
The next one is from Greg Ferry. Greg,
Where's Greg?
Greg right in the
Greg's
front
right
here.
up front.
Citing a UT opinion piece about climate change. And I'm going to skip through most of that just to get to, because he's going to have plenty to say about this issue. Do you believe that climate change is an existential threat? And if you do, what can I do to help you address this threat?
Well, of course it is. So, I think we've got some of the best climate scientists in the entire world that are right up the street that have all the data and the evidence that any rational human being would need to conclude that yes, this is an existential crisis and it's happening faster than any of us would like. And we're either going to proactively address it and reduce emissions at the levels that science demands that we do, or we're going to suffer even more severe consequences than we already are with the status quo. I think about this all the time as a father of two young kids. They're 10 and 9, and what they're going to inherit in terms not only of the near-term quality of life, but the type of legacy that we're leaving behind for their kids and for their grandkids. So then the question is, what do we need to do to actually reduce emissions enough? Ideally to keep things at 1.5 degrees Celsius, but even that is looking tenuous right now. And I'm proud of what we've done with the Inflation Reduction Act. I think it's not everything that we would have liked, but nonetheless is the biggest investment in climate action in the history of the United States, roughly $370 billion. In fact, it's going to be more than that, because what we've seen is that the battery manufacturing for electric vehicles, the supply chain that has been incentivized by all of this, is actually happening faster and bigger than we would have anticipated. And those tax policies are actually going to yield an even faster EV industry in the United States. I think it was not only a bill that was designed to assist with greenhouse gas reduction, it was also at the core of it about industrial policy and about making the case that over time, perhaps the greatest, back to Adam Smith, the greatest wealth creation opportunity of our lifetimes or our kids' lifetimes is combating the climate crisis and growing the industries of the future, and everything from power generation to energy efficiency to sustainable agriculture. All the electricity we're going to need to generate also is going to need to be transformed. So yes, so I'm up to the challenge of whatever we can do. Now, I'm also very mindful of the fact that we've got a problem. The problem, I don't even think, is the Republican Party as much as it is the campaign finance system. I'm not picking on my friends across the aisle. The system stinks. The system of how we fund campaigns and elections, hundreds of millions, actually billions of dollars in dark money, a lot of it coming from the big fossil fuel interests. And I'll give you just one example, because I speak out against the fossil fuel industry a lot. I'm a target of the fossil fuel industry. And if you remember during the campaign, my daughter would see the ad come on against me and she'd say, "Hey, your ad's on again." I'd say, "Well, it's not my ad. That was me on there, but it's not my ad." And then at the bottom you would see paid for by the Congressional Leadership Fund. You remember these ads at all? Yes. And I sure do. And so you say, okay, the Congressional Leadership Fund, that sounds fairly benign. Who's behind that? Anybody have any guesses who's behind that? Koch Industries, good guess. The American Petroleum Institute, Chevron, Exxon, et cetera, on down the list. And the reality is they make a tremendous amount of money with the status quo. You probably have read about the record profits. We just saw the other day, Chevron, Exxon, all the rest, record profits. And they're doing this in the middle of what has been an energy crisis, particularly for those of us here in California, with gas prices through the roof, natural gas through the roof, and they have record profits. So what do we do about it? Well, I've said this is a long answer to your question. Long term, we've got to reform the campaign finance system. It goes back to the Citizens United decision in 2011-12, where all of a sudden, all this unchecked campaign spending, now it's the new normal. And you look back to the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, a lot of environmental legislation, actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, was bipartisan. The EPA, when it was created, Richard Nixon was the president. Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, Endangered Species Act, National Environmental Policy Act, all those were created broad bipartisan majorities. California wanted a waiver from the Clean Air Act because of smog. Who here is from Southern California? Remember all the smog we used to have? We cleaned the air quite a bit, didn't we? Because we went further than the Federal Clean Air Act. Who was governor at the time? Who fought for that? Reagan. And then we had AB 32. Actually, I'll take a step back. We had acid rain. Remember how we had cap and trade that was originally created to deal with acid rain? George H.W. Bush was president. Then AB 32 in California, the most aggressive action any state had ever taken to reduce pollution. Who was the governor? Schwarzenegger, right? John McCain ran for president, talked about combating global climate change. All was fine until Citizens United. So I rest my case that we need campaign finance reform. So there you go. Long answer to an easy question.
The next
Yes.
one's kind of a two-parter if you want to give some water while I ask it.
Okay, yes. See, look at that. That's good staff work right there. He's looking out for me.
It's from the Haywasses, A.T. and Nadia.
Yes.
You want to wave for everybody else?
Hi there.
Speaking for the Ukrainian community of San Diego County, we thank you for your support. We ask for continued support to help Ukraine be victorious and additional support to help rebuild Ukraine. F-16s, please. Second part, please assist refugees coming from Ukraine who need clearer guidelines for accreditation of academic degrees.
Thank you. Absolutely. Well, I will just tell you that I was so deeply moved by President Zelensky's coming to a joint session of Congress. And it's obviously a daily heartbreaking situation on the ground. And just know that we are with you, and we are with the people of Ukraine. When I think about Ukraine, I think about my grandfather. So my grandfather's, he wasn't Ukrainian, he was Eastern European descent. But he came to the United States, or his parents came to the United States. He was born in Chicago, Illinois. He fought in World War II. And I think about why he fought. And it was to stand up against autocracy, against the Putins of his day, and stand up for democracy. And when I think about why we stand with Ukraine, it's not just about Ukraine. Obviously, our heart breaks for men, women, children, civilians. However, this is about democracy. We've got to stand up for democracy at home, with our own institutions, our own checks and balances, the independence of our judiciary, we've got to do everything we can here to strengthen our institutions. But it's also about all around the world, and we have to decide what our values are. And I think I'm very proud of the fact that a broad, bipartisan group of representatives and senators stand firmly on the side of democracy. There are a handful that don't, on the other side of the aisle, but they are a very small minority. And unfortunately, a lot of the folks that are fighting against additional measures to support Ukraine, those are the same people who are fighting the strength of our institutions here. And so it's sort of a pattern of very problematic behavior. But I'm grateful for raising awareness in the Ukrainian American community and beyond, and we'll continue to stand with you and support however we can. Thank you very much.
The next question comes from Edward Gurin. I apologize if I said your last name wrong, Edward. There's two questions, but I'll ask the first one and we can try to get back to the second.
Yes.
What can you do to bring down SDG&E bills?
Oof. So I'm as frustrated as you. I'm an SDG&E customer. I'm also a SoCal Gas customer. And I can tell you that it's been ridiculous, and their reasons have been less than ideal. So we've done a few things. We've written the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. We've written the State Public Utilities Commission demanding investigations into both electricity and gas pricing because their explanations don't fully add up. They claim on the electric side that it's about the outage of 5 refineries. This is now from a few months back with regard to gasoline as well. They say 5 refineries out of the 17 in California shut down, and so gas prices went up by $1.50. But that doesn't track with what we've seen in the past when you had similar numbers of outages. When it comes to the electricity prices, they talk about the need for increases to pay for infrastructure upgrades and things like that. All those are valid, but the need to do it all at once is the problem, right? Or the need to make people pay all at once is the problem. The gas thing is even more instructive than that. So it tracks the commodity pricing of natural gas. I get that, but you couldn't have given people 6 months or a year. You couldn't have spread that out to track that commodity pricing. You had to go from, I was with one restaurant owner the other day, and his bill, SDG&E bill, went from $2,400 in November to over $8,000 in December. And the problem of how they did it, and I'm with you on this. So our gas bill, I went and I looked to see exactly how many therms we use in the average month after I saw the gas bill in December. And all of a sudden they charged us 2.5 times more per therm. My wife was worried that we left the gas on or something, or the heater was, something was broken. And the only thing that was broken is the utility, right? And so what I'm going to demand is that they do something about smoothing out the volatility, even in instances where it requires, because of the commodity pricing, requires that they increase the price to track that commodity price. Does that make sense? So you wouldn't get hit all at once. I'm encouraged that the Public Utilities Commission is giving what they call the climate credit for this coming month. The other thing that I thought was lousy was communication. So by the time, I don't know if this was true for you, but by the time I received an email from them saying, be ready to expect higher than anticipated prices, I'd already used all the gas for the month, right?
They knew the stock market was already going down on the gas.
There you go.
This is gouging.
They care more.
It'll be stopped.
They care more about their stockholders and their executive compensation than they do about any of us. And I completely agree. When I was asked what are the reasons for the rising prices throughout the last couple of years, Putin, pandemic, and price gouging. And I stick to that. Legitimate problems related to the situation in Ukraine, legitimate supply problems related to the challenges with the pandemic, but these companies were making out like bandits, and we were all paying the price. And their record profits are evidence of that. Yep, I'm gonna let him keep the time. Otherwise, Kyle's
There's
gonna
more
get
cards.
mad.
If you'd like a card, you can raise your hand.
Please.
Folks can-
Yes, go right ahead.
What I was gonna say is that the utilities companies are gonna kill the solar business now.
They're trying.
If you don't, no, they're doing more than trying. If you don't sign up for solar by April 15th or something like that, you're not gonna get the credit.
Well, we pushed back, so it's definitely not as good as it used to be. So we pushed back really hard on the Public Utilities Commission for what they call net metering 3.0. So right now, if you put solar on your roof, depending on the size of your home and the size of the solar system, you might pay it back over, let's say, 4 or 5 years. Under this new net metering that they're putting in place, it might take 11, 12 years, something like that. So it really does hurt the economics. To the extent there's good news, the good news is that it would have been worse had we not stepped in and intervened. They would have killed it altogether. Number two, if you put solar and batteries coupled with solar, then it's going to reduce your payback maybe to 8 or 9 years, whereas today it might be like 11.
But how many people can pay $30,000 for a battery?
Absolutely correct. And that's where the borrowing costs have gone up as well, because interest rates have gone up. And so that makes things less economic as well. Completely agree. It's extremely frustrating. And we just got to keep at it. And I hope some of what we've done with the Tax Policies and Inflation Reduction Act to incentivize energy efficiency, electric vehicles, things like that, I hope will help. We do have 10 years of 30% investment tax credit for solar. That's a stable 10 years. What's that?
You got 20. In 20 years, you'll only get a 25% tax credit.
Right.
You got 20 years if you sign up by April 15th.
Right, but all I'm saying is in the federal bill we just passed, it's a 10-year, 30%. And that was good because it was going to go this year to 22, I think, from 30 to 26 to 22. Last year was 26, if I recall. But we're talking from you're preaching to the choir, absolutely.
All right. The next question comes from Annette Robinson. Annette, thank
Hi.
you. Annette's question is about the homeless situation, mental illness help. If not suffering from mental illness, then being unhoused and hopeless will contribute in causing mental illness. Our drugs are not the solution. Housing and hope is. How to make this available in San Diego County?
Well, at the federal level, what I've tried to do is provide whatever tax credit or a direct subsidy or community project funding that I can find for these projects, one by one. And for one of them, it was getting about $4 million, about $3.5 million for the mobile crisis response teams for North County, so they can work weekends, they have more staff as a result. And that's a good model. Mobile crisis response teams are doing good work addressing mental health challenges on the ground, so we help them with more funding. And then in the city of Oceanside, they're building or renovating what they're calling a navigation center that's going to be able eventually to have 100 beds to help people for up to 30 days. Basically it's tricky, right? Because first of all, a lot of folks engage in NIMBYism, not saying anybody here, but when you talk about permanent supportive housing, even veterans housing, people agree in concept, yes, that's a good idea, until you tell them it's going to be, down the street or this or that. We've even had, renowned architects come in and design projects, but people get frustrated. I get all of that, but we've got to keep trying. We've got to keep trying. And the reality is we've got around 9,000. The point in time numbers will come out soon for how many exactly were counted in San Diego County that are homeless. Roughly 9,000, let's say. Around 1,300, last I saw, were veterans. And so I'm focused on the 1,300 who are veterans because my subcommittee has jurisdiction over it. And we've done certain things that I think will help. So probably the most important program for homeless veterans, or one of the most important, is called HUD-VASH. It's VA supportive housing in partnership with Housing and Urban Development. You get a voucher similar to a Section 8 voucher for permanent housing. And previously, until legislation that we got signed into law last year, if you were other than honorably discharged, you were not eligible for a HUD-VASH voucher. You're also not eligible for a variety of other VA-related health services, and you're probably the one that needs it the most. And so people have a misconception of what other than honorably discharged even is. It doesn't mean what we might think. You could be addicted to opioids and other than honorably discharged. If you're an alcoholic, you might be medically discharged. But if you're addicted to something other than alcohol, you could be other than honorably discharged and then prior to last year not eligible for any of these services that you need. So the idea is that we get to functional zero veterans homelessness in San Diego County. And I'm working closely with the Board of Supervisors on that. And that's something that I have direct jurisdiction over from Washington. But then in terms of housing, homelessness, these are all massive challenges. We need a lot more money for permanent supportive housing. We need a lot more acceptance in the community for these different projects. Yes?
One thing that I find frustrating is to drive through neighborhoods and see unoccupied houses in neighborhoods. My understanding in England is they have a squatters bill that's been there historically.
Interesting.
If you abandon or do not occupy a building for so long, it's eligible for squatting. And if you come back within a certain time, then you can reclaim that property, and the squatters then pay the improvements that they have done or the problems that they caused.
Interesting. Interesting.
And it just
Yeah.
breaks my heart to see neighborhoods that are stable with these empty, unoccupied houses.
Interesting.
Because in buildings, I mean, we have empty storefront buildings.
Yeah.
They're unoccupied, and they've been unoccupied for a long time. Why can't they be squatted in?
Well, I don't know about the specifics of what they do in the UK, but one of the things I do know that will be a new law here is if you have a commercial area, it'll be easier to be rezoned into permanent supportive housing. The challenge, as I see, is these units are too expensive to build, right? And they so if we have faster, cheaper, better ways to do it, like I know that the VA in Los Angeles is building 1,500 housing units, and they're going up quickly, and that could be a model. Exactly, could be a model, but you can't do that everywhere, just because of local ordinances and limitations. Yep. Go ahead.
Thank you. We only have 10 minutes left, so we're going to try to
Kim, we
just
gotta
give you
go.
a warning there.
Gotta go.
I'm going to merge these two together about the same topic. Kim Whitmore, is it Whitmore, from
Hi.
Oceanside, and Ron Dodge.
Where's Ron?
Ron,
He's there.
thank you,
Hi,
Ron.
Ron.
Asking about near and longer term, 10 plus years plans for the San Clemente and Del Mar sections of the Surf Line.
Oh.
It appears, and then that was Kim's. Ron's is, it appears there has not been much, if any, funding to improve the second busiest passenger rail corridor in the USA. There's long been a plan to double track the entire LA to San Diego corridor.
Yeah.
There were 100-year-old bridge pile trestles, single tracks, and slow circuitous steep route over a ridge, slowing travel. He asked, please exclude the Del Mar tunnels as a singular case in point of moving forward.
Well, so you're both right, and it's deeply frustrating that it's gotten to this point where it now really is an emergency, where the rail line was shut down months at a time, is still shut down on weekdays up in Orange County, and growing up, near near the San Clemente portion of where it shut down, this was a disaster waiting to happen for many years. I used to go out there. And Del Mar, there's a different set of considerations because it's on a bluff. But in San Clemente, you could go out there and play beach volleyball where the tracks were. Maybe 100 feet or more of sand out there. There's a basketball court in Capistrano Beach where I would play as a kid. It's gone. The basketball court's gone. The public restrooms are gone. The parking lot's half gone. And then down where there used to be the beach volleyball courts in San Clemente down there in Cypress Shores is now just riprap and the track. And so the moral of it, and here in Del Mar we know that the bluffs and that collapse is occurring 5, 10, 15 feet a year. And so Mother Nature always wins. And so what are we going to do about it? Well, there's bad news and there's good news. The bad news is we've allowed it to get to this point. Second busiest intercity passenger rail in the United States. About 8 million between Amtrak and Metrolink ride it every year, $1 billion in commerce every year, and it's part of something called STRACnet because it connects the bases. The bases need it as a backup, and that's really good for us, by the way, strategically as we seek to get the funds. So every year we go to the Army Corps of Engineers and the Federal Railroad Administration and Department of Transportation, and we get Band-Aids. They're expensive Band-Aids, by the way, $5 million here, $10 million there, $6 million for San Clemente right now. We also get money for sand, right? We got $30.5 million for Encinitas and Solana Beach for sand. We got $9.3 million for San Clemente for sand. You say, well, why does that matter? Well, the more sand you have, you can hold off Mother Nature a little while longer, right? But the only way long term that we're going to fix this is to relocate parts of the tracks. Del Mar, you've got to relocate. San Clemente, you've got to relocate. It's going to be very expensive. And the way you do it, first you got to fund the planning, the engineering, and the design. Get that to where you're ready to build, and then you got to go fund the construction. But you can't fund the construction, you can't get money for the construction until you finished the planning, the engineering, and the design. So where are we? The bipartisan infrastructure law has a $36 billion pot of money. 20 for rail, for modernizing, upgrading rail. 24 billion of it is dedicated, earmarked, if you will, for the Northeast Rail Corridor. Those that have followed the president's career know that he took the Northeast Rail Corridor for every day for 40 years, going to and from Delaware. So we have number 2. We have the second busiest. So about a year ago, I tried to relate that to him in a way that I said, Mr. President, you traveled on the busiest. We have number 2. It is falling into the ocean. It is an emergency. We need your help. And so I started planting those seeds with him quite a long time ago. We then had Secretary Buttigieg out here, and we took him up the rail corridor, and we showed it to him. And he said, wow, this is really a big problem. And then when the president came out, he visited Oceanside, he visited Carlsbad, and he went out and told a big crowd of people, I don't know if anybody was there, of the need to, you were there, yeah, you were in the back, I remember, of the need to fix this problem, the need to fix this problem. And after that event, I said, Mr. President, thank you so much for bringing that up. And then we had another event the next day. He brought it up again the next day. I didn't tell him to do it. He did it. And so after all of that, we've had many good conversations. We're going to need billions of dollars over many years. And for me, this is a project much like San Onofre. We're not going to fix it overnight, but we can go a long way year after year after year until it's done. We got a big help from Toni Atkins. Everybody knows who Toni Atkins is? Great state senator, Speaker Pro Tem of the Senate. She got $300 million from Sacramento for the planning, engineering, and design for the Del Mar portion. We need more money for San Clemente, and then we'll need more money still. Could be $3, $4, $5 billion completely, after all is said and done, for relocation. But it's one of those projects, much like getting the nuclear waste off our coast, much like getting to a rate of 0 veteran homelessness in our county, that we're going to look back, and if we work together and we just stay persistent, we're going to get it done.
And possibly
Yes,
trench some railroad tracks, right, Councilmember Acosta? You in Carlsbad?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, we need those tracks lowered so it's, we don't have at-grade crossings.
Absolutely, and I thank Teresa for her great leadership on that. Yes, sir. You all are asking the questions, so I'm going to let you, please.
First of all, thank you. It was unclear. I initially thought the $300 million was federal funds, but they were
State funds. State funds.
And you confirmed
I'm going to need probably 10 times that for federal funds to make all this happen.
Actually, the estimates are exactly 10 times that. But I deliberately was trying to exclude the Del Mar example from this. Our entire coastline is collapsing.
Yeah.
And one of the major problems that gets overlooked, ignored as a matter of convenience, is a problem that occurred in a little hamlet up the coast north of Ventura called La Conchita.
Mm-hmm.
And they had two massive slides there, one in 95 and in 05. First round was a lawsuit against the growers on top of the bluff, and that was undisclosed what happened there. The second time in 05, they handed over the keys to the property and $5 million, and the growers walked away. And it was all tied to drainage and water and those things.
Right.
Same as slide.
Right.
And that's part of what's going on in San Clemente is that everybody who moved to the West Coast came from the East Coast, and the same problem happened in San Francisco with the Golden Gate Park that requires all the excess watering, soaking in the sand dunes. But we're watering our bluffs, and Shepherding Coon noted this back in the 70s and published it in the mid-80s, that irrigation, agricultural and residential, soaking into the ground and causing these to slide. Of course, they also seal the ground favorably, build up flood control dams in the mountains, so the sand coming into the coastline, on and on. As they do patchwork solutions to problems, we end up with a new patchwork fix.
Right.
So, you know, the bluff sliding is ongoing, and the tracks are even closer to the bluffs up in Monster Ranch, north of Santa Barbara.
Yep. Yep.
Look out the train and go straight to the water breaking coastal. So, you know, moving the tracks inland a bit is feasible, and you've probably heard it before, but for about 25%
Bless you.
of the proposed $2 billion, the tracks could be moved about 100 feet inland from where they are right now. And that-
I very much appreciate your perspective. You know, the question about what to do north of Los Angeles, that's a whole different set of participants. The rail corridor advances all the way up to San Luis Obispo, but for purposes of relocation of San Clemente and Del Mar, you know, OCTA up in Orange County and Sandag down here are both needing to work on those respective projects and you know, gather the local support as well. Del Mar is further ahead by a long shot with regard to relocation, but that's not to say that you know, Orange County hasn't considered it as well.
We are now at 4 o'clock.
Okay,
I'm
let's
sorry.
let's go quick. Yep.
I represent a nationwide organization of passenger rail advocates, Rail Passengers
Yep.
Association, Matthew Shaw.
Yep.
And I have their approval today to tell you that let you know, not tell you, that we will bring to bear over 100 rail advocates and experts to try to create something like, maybe we want to call it the Southwest Corridor, but we need to be smart like NEC and do something like that here. And I think
Let's definitely let's definitely have a follow-up discussion, and because the you know, from a next steps perspective, the corridor needs to be identified as part of the corridor ID program by the Federal Railroad Administration. I think the deadline to do that is in March.
it just got extended, it was March 20th.
Good.
So we're all with
Yeah.
you on this. We want
Good.
to make this a cause.
Let's make sure we get in touch. Great.
That's got a folder.
All right, let's do a lightning round. What do you say? Real quick, we got to move on.
What are you going to do to fix Social Security?
Oh my God! Not let my friends across the aisle. Not let my friends across the aisle undermine it, but we actually have legislation called the Social Security 2100 Act. And what that says, you know how you pay your payroll tax up to around 150, a little less than that, 140 grand, 150 grand. Today, if you make 150 million or 150,000, you pay the same amount of payroll tax. Does that seem fair? Not to me. So all the Social Security 2100 bill does, it says, okay, we're not going to tax you between 150 and 400, but above 400 of income, we're going to do payroll tax on that. If you just do that, you pay for Social Security. Done. End of story. Now a lot of people don't like a lot of people don't like tax increases on. If you're making more than 400,000 a year, you might not like that. But
Can I ask your position on two things with Social Security? Sorry.
was it your question?
It was my question.
Okay.
I'm 49. I'm all for you moving the dates out. Move us back a year, 2 years.
Nah, I'm not for that. I'm not for that. You don't have to.
But I'm just telling you as a
Yeah.
constituent, I would support that.
Yeah.
Second thing, what is your position on means testing Social Security in the future?
You don't have to do that either if you do what I just said. If you just tax above 400,000, so you don't have to increase a penny of taxes on people making less than $400,000. But if you make more than 400,000, you pay your payroll taxes you normally would on the first 150, and then you pay on above 400. You don't have to do anything you just said.
I understand, but
By the way,
on means testing.
let me say, I just said I support Social Security 2100 rather than what you're suggesting. So I carry a card with me. Looks like a Social Security card. In our district, there are, guess how many Social Security recipients there are?
At least one.
At least one. Any guesses for real? Any guesses?
250,000.
That's too high. That's a good guess. 124,110 Social Security recipients in our district. And how much in benefits do they get? Any ideas? Total, collectively. $198 million a month in monthly benefits. For my parents, for many, it could be many of you, you rely on that. You paid into it. You paid into it. Yes. Oh, my guest at the State of the Union, retired Army veteran, 5 combat tours, permanently disabled, 100% disabled in Afghanistan, relies on Social Security today. And he went to Washington as my guest at the State of the Union, not to talk necessarily about veterans, but to talk about the need to protect Social Security. And that's why he was there, to make it clear we're not going to allow anybody to cut Social Security benefits.
Do you want to add, maybe just, could you explain your recent vote on the bill that denounced the horrors of socialism?
Yeah, so if you read the bill, I do not support socialism. I'm a proud capitalist. I do think that, sometimes we falsely conflate social programs, and when I saw that this bill was being put up by my friends across the aisle, I saw it as sort of an underhanded way to try to get at Social Security. And I felt that was really inappropriate. But when you actually read the content of the bill, yes, of course, we don't agree with socialist and communist regimes that had human rights abuses and autocracies and so forth, dictators, of course. So that, unfortunately, it's kind of silly season, even though it's only February of 2023. Some of what they proposed, put on the floor has just been kind of wacky, shall we say.
Do you want to wrap it up with your closing remarks?
Did we get to everybody?
No, I've got a whole table still, unfortunately, but we can answer any of your questions directly with us. All right. Do President Biden, the Senate, and the not insane members of the House intend to address the dangers of Christian nationalism and evangelical fascism? Is there any legislation?
Wow.
You guys have very substantive questions in general here.
Not that I have seen, but I do think that there is the separation of church and state is so important. And I really worry at some of the very irresponsible dialogue coming from some of my colleagues around these issues. And I don't need to name names, but you can figure out who they are. And I believe, so I came from a religious, different religious background family where my father is Jewish and my mother is Catholic. And that just made me open-minded. And so when I hear this is, this nation is for this religion or for that religion, well, no, it's not. It's not for any religion. And we also believe that you don't need necessarily to be a person of faith to be a person of values in this country. I'm a person of faith, but I know plenty of people that aren't. And so, I think that sometimes people are allowing their religion to get in front of their politics in a very unhelpful way. In terms of, in terms of, sure, right, and in terms of what we would actually do legislatively about it, I don't know of anything other than continuing to protect the separation of church and state. All right, one more.
This one staff can answer because it's about global entry. So how can we incentivize biotech companies to continue their small molecule drug research with the IRA?
Well, I'll tell you, who asked that?
Heather?
Excellent. Oh, Heather? Very good. Well, I think it's working. So why do I say that? I was just a couple days ago with our friends at Genentech, and they are adding a brand new facility up the street from here in Oceanside, a $450 million investment and 1,100 construction jobs and 150 full-time jobs at Genentech for exactly that type of innovative life science approach. And when I talked to their CEO about the IRA, there's reason for optimism that CMS is going to get the regulatory side right. And what we tried to do with the Inflation Reduction Act as it pertained to allowing Medicare to negotiate the price of prescription drugs is there is a difference between insulin and some phenomenal life science drug that we don't even know exists or doesn't even exist yet, but we want to make sure that that can be developed and that company will be rewarded for taking the risk of innovation. However, somebody that's marketing insulin, there's no IP left with insulin, right? All they're doing is price gouging, as we were talking about before. And so we said we're going to cap that. And for other big, widely accepted drugs, that was the idea. And so to bifurcate between those drugs, where we pay more than anybody else times a lot, versus the truly innovative. And so what I saw the other day at Genentech, and what I see in different companies around San Diego, is true innovation, and actually a belief that the IRA, assuming that CMS implements it as we intended for it to be implemented, will actually be a net positive for them. And so that's my hope. That's my hope.
I got to get you home so you can take
All
your
right,
son basketball practice.
I got to. Oh, that's actually a really good point. I have to pick my son up from practice, or I'm a dead duck, and Valentine's Day is tomorrow, so I don't want that. So I just want to say thank you for coming. Thank you for all you do. Join us next month or in future months. We'd love to see you. Levin.house.gov is our website, and I believe our staff is going to stick around, right?
Yes, we're
Can
here.
we give them a round of applause? Our staff. Thank you, guys. Thank you. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you. I hope so too. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it. Thank you. Oops.
Yeah, email me.
Yeah, I gotta go. Thank you. Thank you. I gotta go pick up my son, or I'm gonna be in big trouble. Thank you. I forgot about that. Is this the Massa Act? No. Something else. Okay, I'll take a look. Thank you. Oh yes. Thank you. Thank you. I'm co-sponsoring the Massa legislation.
This is about the running American.
I'm going to be out of town.
Okay. Okay.
So far has 180.
Could you email me?
I'd be delighted.